All right, in this video, we're going to get into some details about how to use the chart that you've been, tracking on to actually be of practical use to you. We've kind of seen some ways that you can read it to see what's going on with your reproductive health, but now we're going to talk about how we can use it for natural family planning, and whether that's for postponing pregnancy, using it as a natural method of birth control, or using it to achieve pregnancy, whether you're struggling with infertility or not. These next two videos are going to cover those things. So we're going to start off with how to use cycle tracking, how to use what's technically called natural family planning or the fertility awareness method as natural birth control. And before we begin, I'm going to give you 2 rules to follow to use it as natural birth control. But before we jump into those, I want to say that this is very much a partnership between you and your partner. This has to be a cooperative thing. So when we're using this method as our method of birth control, there will be days where you have to avoid sexual activity, and that can't be one-sided. You have to both be on board with this. Some people think that, that's going to be so hard to do. But what I found to be true, and what my friends who have implemented this have found to be true, is that it's actually really empowering. It's strengthening to the relationship because you're working together towards a common goal. He's helping to take care of you in your health. You're learning more about your body. You're working together with nature, with your body. And instead of just trying to fight it, you're learning to work together, and that's empowering, and most people find that they actually enjoy that aspect of it. But do be aware, it is a 2-sided method. Okay, so I get asked, how reliable is it? Well, first of all, I want to say that all contraceptives have a failure rate. The pill is not 100% effective. It is not 100% guaranteed to prevent a pregnancy. There is absolutely no contraceptive that is 100% foolproof. Okay? So the way that this is going to work is that there are going to be days that you have to avoid. And if you misread your signs, which you're going to get better at and better at and better at, but if you misread your signs, that compromises the effectiveness of the method. Now, this is one of the most effective methods. And if you are following the rules exactly, it's like 99.9% effective. It's 100% effective if you're following it 100% accurately. So you have to take these first 2 cycles as you're learning it and realize that there are going to be bumps in the road as you're learning it. There's going to be a learning curve, and you may misread your signs at first. These symptoms, you may misread what your cervical fluid is doing on a certain day. So you need to recognize that these first few cycles cannot be relied on with this as your method of birth control. You have to learn how to use it. So my suggestion, especially if you're coming off the pill or coming off of any other hormonal birth control, your cycles are most likely going to be kind of wonky. So that is going to add another factor into learning your body. Your body, you can't really learn it because it's going to be funky and getting to figure out itself. And so you're going to be figuring it out, and it's going to be figuring it out. Give yourself grace here. Take a deep breath. It's going to all even out. It's going to work out okay. Okay, but here's my suggestion. Use a backup. Now, I'm going to put a link below to the condom that I recommend. And there's a side note. There are side effects with some condoms if you have allergies. And there are side effects in that you're putting synthetic materials up into your body, into an open, we think of when we get germs, don't touch your eyes, don't touch your nose, don't touch your ears. Well, where's another opening into your body? It's your vagina. And so you're sticking synthetic materials up in there. So there's always a risk. And right now, we're not entirely sure what those risks are because we haven't been studying it. We haven't done research. We just haven't even thought of it yet. But there is some suggestion that these synthetic materials are going to be harmful or are harmful to our bodies when we're using them in the way that we're using condoms. So the one that I linked to below is the most natural, one of the most natural ones that's on the market today. And they're really hard to find, at least in my part of town. I have a hard time finding them. They are more expensive. However, you can use them, you know, during this learning phase, and then hopefully you'll never need them again. So it's for a short time. Use backup, because when you're using two methods of contraceptive, you know, you fall back on the one that has like the least chance of working. So like if you're using a condom during your super fertile phase of your cycle, you are relying on the condom, and you're going to get what its statistic, what its percentage of failure or success rate is. So basically you're using it as your method of contraceptive while you're learning to use this one. Okay, so let's get into it. We have 2 rules that you're going to follow if you want to use this method as your method of birth control. The first rule is called the dry day rule. So before ovulation, you are safe the evening of every dry day. So do you remember how we talked about fluid, and when you're wiping, you're keeping track of your fluid throughout the day. And if it was a dry day, you are safe that evening. But the next day is considered potentially fertile if your cervical fluid is masked. So say for example, on cycle day 8, you have, it's a dry day, no cervical fluid, but you go ahead and you have intercourse the evening of cycle day 8. The next day, it's very possible that your cervical fluid could be masked by the sexual intercourse you had the night before, the fluid that's left over from that. So keep that in mind when you're tracking throughout the day, that you might have something masking potentially fertile fluid. So you can't count that the next day is infertile just because, oh, the day before was dry, so today must be dry, and this must be fluid left over from last night. You don't know that. It could be both. Like fertile fluid may have appeared underneath and is being masked by the fluid from intercourse. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind the events and what you have going on. Remember, refer back to the list from the cervical fluid video of all of the things that could mask cervical fluid. Keep that in mind on any day that you think might be dry, but then you're having some fluid. So cervical fluid, every day that is dry before ovulation is considered safe that evening. All right, then you have cervical fluid, what we call the fertile phase. You're considered fertile every single one of those days. And I'm going to talk more in the How to Achieve Pregnancy video about why all of those days are considered fertile, but just suffice it to explain here that all of those are a welcoming place for sperm and a place where the sperm can live and thrive. And so when that fluid is present, you have a potential chance for being fertile. So even if you're not planning on a pregnancy right now, I definitely recommend that you go and watch the pregnancy video after this, just to have that whole idea, grasp the whole idea of how to work with your cycle, and just have that in your head so that you know you have that knowledge. Okay, so the fertile phase, all of those days that you have cervical fluid are considered fertile. You have to avoid sexual activity on all of those days. Okay, now you may choose to use a backup method like a condom on those days, but remember, you are no longer then using this as your only method of birth control. You are then relying on the condom as your method of birth control. And just know, if your condom breaks, you will get pregnant. Okay, because you're using it during your most fertile time. Anyways, so just keep that in mind. Do not engage in sexual activity on the days where you have fertile cervical fluid or you will get pregnant. Okay, here's the second rule. It's called the peak day rule. So you are safe the evening of the third consecutive day after your peak day, which is the last day of egg white, the egg white fluid, or having a lubricative vaginal sensation. So the last day on your chart, because you're going to be charting how your fluid is building, and then the day that it drops off and it's dry, that's day 1, and then you count 2 and then 3. And so then the evening of that third day is when you're cleared for sexual activity. You're cleared to have intercourse without worrying that you're going to get pregnant. So that's your window that you have to avoid right there, from the start of cervical fluid to 3 days post cervical fluid. And that's what you want to avoid if you're trying to use this method as a method of natural birth control. So when we're charting ovulation, or before ovulation, cervical fluid is the most important sign building up to, and afterwards you're probably going to be more relying on your temperatures and seeing what they're doing. So for this method of birth control, absolutely watch your fluid.